What's up, everybody? Welcome into Group Chat Sports. This is Group Chat Football Live. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate everyone for tuning in today. This is our national college football show, talking the biggest news in the sport, from transfer news, which starting to get going again, man. We've got some big transfer news to talk about here in just a moment. Coaching news is always one of the big topics. Not so much at this time of year necessarily.
Although Stanford,
right? It's gonna have an impact on, of course, which we did have an update about. That's what I was gonna say. The other day we did the update on Stanford. That's a big impact on the story we're going to talk about here in just a second, and then recruiting news as well. But we will start with that portal news, and that's David Bailey, who's the top portal prospect available right now from Stanford. Obviously, Frank Reich taking over there now as the interim head coach after Troy Taylor was fired with his situation over there. And this is an explosive pass rusher, has been taking visits here, has visited Texas Tech, wrapping up his Texas visit, and then going to be visiting UCLA. So UCLA would be the closest school in proximity to where he's at right now. But Texas Tech, who's been super aggressive in the portal here, Texas, they already have some nice pass rushers on the roster, but I don't think any team in the country would pass up adding this guy.
big time player, guy's been on the radar for a long time. 6'3", 250, not your extremely, your Shamar Stewart type big defensive end, but somebody's got more than enough size to be a pass rush specialist, has some strength to him too. He's not just somebody who is going to get knocked over easily. He is the top available player in the transfer portal. Number 10 overall, of course, comes available at a very unique time because of the departure of his head coach, Coach Taylor, being terminated. That frees up an opportunity for David Bailey to test the market, and he is doing so in a major way. You mentioned Texas Tech. We've done a lot of shows on what Texas Tech is doing in the transfer portal. Probably the story of the transfer portal in many respects is Texas Tech and the money they are spending with that Matador collective. And defensive end, one of the most premium positions you can find. They already went and got Romello Height from Georgia Tech. But I think with a guy like Bailey, they're going to get this done. This is a premier pass rusher. Height's a very good pass rusher at the Big 12 level. He had success in the ACC, had a cup of coffee in the SEC as well, and also played in the Big 10, I guess, when he was at USC, although that was still Pac at that time. Yep. So Pac-12. But this guy's been around the block, goes to Texas Tech. Now on the other side, to land a guy like Bailey, potentially, you're talking about a guy who was the number 34 overall prospect coming out of high school in Mater Dei. It's a very Mater Dei-centric episode. We'll get to some more prospects from there in a second. But premier program in Southern California, number 34 prospect overall, number 3 edge rusher, number 2 player in the state of California. This is a time when USC has not been keeping guys like this local. He ends up going to Stanford, starts 16 of 33 games from 22 to 24, 111 tackles, 22.5 for loss, 14.5 sacks, and 7 forced fumbles. True freshman All-America. Has remained productive in the last few years. Watching him on tape, Pete, tough, high motor, strong, but still has that natural athleticism and that bend to get around. You see him getting sacks against teams like Notre Dame, Clemson, good, highly ranked schools that have premier offensive talent, particularly at the offensive line position, place like Notre Dame. He's still getting to the quarterback. I think that's why you see Texas, who can get anybody in the country, who already has Trey Moore, Colin Simmons, Anthony Hill as a linebacker getting pass rush, still looking at a guy like Bailey to add to their attack. UCLA as well, the local school, but Texas Tech, pairing him with Romello Height, is a very, very interesting fit in a Big 12 that's wide open.
And from an NIL perspective, this is pretty good timing for Bailey. I would say he's the top guy at his position in the portal right now. There's not too many players in the portal. As we understand, spring is still wrapping up here. So those players will be entering. But if you're a team who, now that you've seen what you have after spring practice, or at least most of these schools are midway through, you have a better idea of what you're going to need. The availability is very low. So I would imagine that Bailey, as we see with some of the schools in the mix here, he's a very wanted man. And I would imagine he's going to be paid pretty pretty well for his services here because of that.
Yeah, and top 10 player overall in the portal. So he's number one available player. But even if you put the guys that signed, he's still a top 10 player in the portal. I think that speaks to his talent. This is an NFL type draft pick next year. He doesn't have maybe the perfect NFL dimensions from a size standpoint. And even though he's athletic, I'm not sure he's, like Nolan Smith that went to Philadelphia, for example, who was a little more undersized as an edge rusher, but had the 4.4 speed. But there is a very nice set of skills athletically and size-wise. And he's been productive and he plays hard. So this is an NFL type player who's going to if you put this guy in the Big 12, he's going to be one of the premier pass rushers in the conference immediately. This is not a conference, when you really look at the last couple of years, where there's a ton of pass rush, right? I mean, Pete, just going through the list, Arizona State, who's the best team in that conference this year, they have some guys that can get after. They got after at Texas Tech pretty good, but you're not talking about premier first-round talents coming into the draft this year. Colorado, Kansas State's had some in the past, but nothing crazy right now. So again, you look at this conference, a guy like this, I think, will stand out in a major way as a pass rusher and get after some quarterbacks, which there are very talented passing games in this conference. A guy like Bailey gives Texas Tech something that other teams don't have when it comes to disrupting those passing attacks in conference.
I'm sure we'll do a video once Bailey makes his final decision. So keep it locked on Group Chat Sports for that. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will have that David Bailey story covered without a doubt. Moving along here, USC staying hot on the recruiting trail. Lincoln Riley, I think the hire of Chad Bowden in the offseason as GM from Notre Dame has paid really, really strong dividends early on here. They've been on a nice run, and couple big ones to talk about here. One of them that just broke here in the last hour. But first, we'll start with the big boy, Tamohini Tupui, and then we'll get to Cohen Brown, a wide receiver, after.
So if you look at these two pickups, they really do have Bowden's name all over it, because we'll get to the wide receiver position in a second. But starting with Tom, you want to keep the best players home, the blue chip elite players, particularly at positions that are hard to find, like nose tackle, 330-pounder with athleticism. And you also want to continue to build up what's historically been a very strong Polynesian pipeline to the University of Southern California. Now, Penei Sewell going to Oregon and becoming a top 10 pick, that's not a good look. All these offensive linemen that you've seen get drafted from the Polynesian community in the last few years, with Francis Mauanoa, a Southern California native when he moved from Samoa, at the University of Miami, all the way across the country. So these guys that have been leaving should not be leaving if you're a USC fan. You got to keep those guys home, build a strong foundation and a core. And you've had, like, Jaden Mayava, right? You've had guys from that community play major roles for the team, but you need a critical mass of the absolute best. Too many of them going to schools like Oregon State and going first round, Arizona, Miami, Florida, Oregon. So talk about Tupui, who's a defensive tackle, nose guard, 6'3", 320, 4-star, 130 on the composite, 15th ranked defensive lineman, 15th ranked in count. To me, watching his film, I think those numbers are low. Originally committed to Oregon, which we just talked about earlier, despite playing in a Southern California power, decommits, quickly goes to the University of Southern California. I know that Miami was in the mix here. UCLA was trying to get in the mix here, but ultimately USC gets it done pretty fast, and they got to be excited about the size, the ability to play nose, but also the athleticism to play some offense, get some carries, score some touchdowns, 42 total tackles, 10.5 for loss, 6.5 sacks, defensive MVP in a loaded Trinity League. This is one of my favorite players in the Class B. Just, you look at him, and it's very easy to see the vision. Yeah, you see the vision. You say, okay, this guy's, he's two gaps in high school a little bit, so he can definitely plug the middle, but he's also athletic enough to make plays like that in the backfield. If you ever need a fullback, you can do that as well. But I think really you want this guy to just help build back your defense to the point that it was under Pete Carroll, where their lines were the best in their region, which has not been the case for too long.
Yeah, guys were getting drafted left and right, highly, obviously, across the board at that time. But it seems like
look at the interception.
Yeah,
look at the big
man. This is. I mentioned it the other day when I think we were talking about him on our Miami show. you remember some of the Vita Vea stuff
Yeah.
that, out of when he was coming out of high school, and Vita Vea wasn't as highly ranked as Tom. So I like the finish, right? It's not just the athlete here, but you see him finishing plays in the backfield. I mean, nice move. But sometimes you see these big guys who are making the initial move. And listen, he should be winning a lot of these one-on-one battles at the high school level with the size and the speed that he has. But I mean, look at this. He picks it up and scores. I love the player. I think this is a statement pickup, and like you said, you just shouldn't lose someone like this from a local power.
You see, and he's not just a one-trick pony. He's got moves. He can counter. He can redirect. He's got the athleticism. I don't think this is just your standard nose tackle who's going to go in there and brawl, although he has that ability. He can move laterally. You see him making play after play, sack in the backfield.
Using his hands.
And these are self-created plays. When you see sometimes, here you got him playing fullback here. Sometimes when you see a team like Mater Dei, these guys are kind of falling into sacks because everybody else is causing pressure. This guy's creating a lot of this havoc on his own, beating blocks, using his hands. You see him right here. Again, this is the best competition you can get in the Trinity League. Shedding a block, making a play. So I believe that
Bishop
like
Gorman.
Yeah, it is Bishop Gorman. I see SJ Al-Fatouh, the number one center in the country out there. So even better competition on that play. And then you see him getting after the quarterback.
Yeah, huge pickup here for the Trojans. And again, not the only one that they've gotten here in the last 24 hours. As just a little while ago, wide receiver from Texas, Cohen Brown, committed to the Trojans.
Yeah, with Cohen Brown, this another way of looking at Bowden as a GM. Not just keeping the Poly kids local, not just keeping the LA kids local. It's also about evaluating. And you go get a guy like Cohen Brown. This guy had offers. He was a clear P4 prospect, but he was the number 92 player in Texas, not somebody who was on the top of the boards on paper. But then you say, okay, 5'11", 175, actually looks stronger than that in his video. Waxahachie, Texas, Ellis County, right outside Dallas, Fort Worth. Statistically, it's there. 54 catches, over 1,084 yards, 11 touchdowns. You want your high school receivers to be productive. It's a big indicator. Rush the ball. Also played some defensive snaps, had 2 sacks. But I think the thing that stands out with Cohen Brown is what you're seeing right here. 10-6 in the 100 meters, ran that as a junior. So Bowden's trying to get ahead of it with some just, hey, who's got traits? Who's got toughness? Who's got enough size that they're going to grow? And then if I get this guy up and running, I got a 4-4, 4-3 type receiver with more than enough size. And I'd have to, go crazy to land him because I'm going into the heart of Texas for the number 92 player in the state. Guys like this sneak away all the time. Look at Ashton Jeanty, maybe the best pure player in the country last year, coming from really a very similar area to where Brown is from, in that Dallas-Fort Worth area, having a track background, not quite as fast as Brown, but blossoming into an elite player. Maybe they see some of those things in Cohen Brown. There you see him, even those receivers, you see him running with the ball there, and he has that ability as well.
And taking a look at this USC class right now, number 1 in the country, 19 commits. So obviously that's going to help the ranking, but a lot of highly rated guys here in the class.
Yeah, it's number 1 class in the country. There's a lot of time to go, but getting guys like Tom, I'm sure they would have loved to pair him with Chris Henry. Chris Henry reaffirms his commitment to Ohio State, originally from Ohio, even though he's in Southern California now. But there's plenty of options to add to this class. Think about Ryder Lyons, even though he's technically going to take a mission and be down the road. He's someone you'd like to add if you're USC. I mean, they already flipped, some tremendous talent at the quarterback position. So maybe, do they want Lyons to be like basically the guy that ultimately replaces Hussein Longstreet from last year, somebody that ultimately replaces, this year's quarterback. Who knows what they do at that position? But, at this year's quarterback, Jonas Williams from Chicago. We did a video on him when he committed. Very talented, high upside player that they had to fight for. They got him from Oregon. Oregon now focusing on Jared Curtis. So you got 2 quarterbacks back-to-back that can play. Ryder Lyons potentially in the pipeline. Just going through the class list here. Asun Tafa, just kind of, we were talking about Polynesian players. That is a very, very good one on the interior offensive line. Brandon Lockhart, a very, very gifted cornerback, Jamion Winfield, going into Texas to grab Winfield. I believe he's originally from the deep South. So getting him all the way across the country to Southern California. Samodi Kotaanga from Rancho Santa Margarita, very good program there. Santa Margarita Catholic. So you got a lot of guys that you needed to keep here in Southern California, staying home.
Well, Lincoln Riley, man, good start here to Chad Bowden's career at USC, and obviously success on the field could only help that moving forward. Trojans fans, keep it locked here on Group Chat Sports. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy content like this, and we'll be back tomorrow. So hit that like, subscribe. Thank you all for watching the live show today.
See you tomorrow.